In the heart of a modest neighborhood in Chicago, Illinois, where the autumn leaves painted the streets in shades of gold and red, lived Harold and Evelyn Johnson. The couple, both in their late 70s, had called their small brick bungalow home for over 4 decades. Harold, a retired postal worker with a gentle smile and a collection of old jazz records, spent his days tending to the flower garden out front, while Evelyn, a former schoolteacher known for her warm hospitality, baked apple pies that filled the air with cinnamon sweetness. Their home, with its creaky wooden floors and walls adorned with family photos, stood as a testament to a life built on hard work and quiet resilience in a city that had seen its share of changes. The trouble began one crisp October morning when a sleek black SUV pulled up to their curb. Out stepped Marcus Hale, a sharp-suited real estate developer from a firm eyeing the block for upscale condos. Hale, with his polished briefcase and no-nonsense demeanor, knocked firmly on the door. Evelyn answered, wiping flour from her hands, expecting perhaps a neighbor. Instead, Hale explained that the property had been sold to his company due to unpaid taxes from years ago, a debt the Johnsons swore they had settled long before. "I'm afraid we have to initiate eviction proceedings," he said coolly, handing over a formal notice. "You have 30 days to vacate." The words hung heavy in the air, turning Evelyn's face pale as Harold joined her, his hands trembling on his cane. Word spread quickly through the close-knit community, where folks still waved from porches and shared Sunday barbecues. Neighbors like Mrs. Ramirez from across the street rallied, offering to help with legal advice. But the Johnsons felt the weight of age and uncertainty. That evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Harold sat in his armchair, staring at the notice. "We've paid every penny we owed," he murmured to Evelyn, who nodded, her eyes misty. Little did they know, this eviction threat would unravel threads from their past, drawing unexpected allies into their fight. The neighborhood buzzed with concern, but Hale's firm seemed unstoppable, backed by city officials who prioritized development over sentiment. As the first deadline loomed, the Johnsons clung to their home, unaware that a shadow from Chicago's underbelly was about to emerge. Weeks passed, and the eviction notice escalated into court summons. The Johnsons, with the help of a pro bono lawyer from a local legal aid clinic, attended a hearing in a bustling downtown courthouse, where fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the air smelled of stale coffee. Judge Harlan, a stern woman with wire-rimmed glasses, reviewed the documents. Hale's team argued unpaid liens and code violations, minor issues like peeling paint that they claimed made the property unsafe. "This isn't personal," Hale testified, adjusting his tie. "It's business. The city needs progress." But Evelyn, her voice steady despite the nerves, recounted their history, how they bought the home in 1975, facing redlining barriers that made loans nearly impossible for black families back then, and how they'd maintained it through economic hardships. Outside the courtroom, tension built. Protesters from community groups gathered, chanting for fair housing rights, highlighting how evictions disproportionately affected black elders in neighborhoods like theirs. Harold's mind wandered to his youth in the 1950s, working odd jobs in the city's warehouses, where whispers of organized figures kept the peace amid labor disputes. One name surfaced in old stories: Vito Moretti, a local businessman whose influence stretched from construction to quiet enforcements. Unbeknownst to most, Vito had been a silent benefactor to families like the Johnsons decades ago, after Harold's father helped him during a tough time. As the judge adjourned for deliberation, granting a temporary stay, a nondescript sedan idled nearby. From it emerged a man in a tailored coat, Tony Russo, Vito's right-hand associate. He'd heard of the case through old connections and placed a call. "Boss, it's the Johnsons. Remember them?" Back at their home that night, as Evelyn prepared a simple dinner of fried chicken and collard greens, a knock echoed. It was Russo, hat in hand, promising intervention. The Mafia's code of loyalty, forged in Chicago's gritty history, was about to collide with modern real estate battles. The sprawling estate of Vito Moretti, perched on the rugged bluffs overlooking Lake Michigan, just beyond the bustling suburbs of Chicago, where the wind carried the faint, salty tang of the water, mixed with the earthy scent of pine trees lining the private drive. It was a place that whispered of old money and older secrets, its stone facade weathered by decades of Midwestern storms, ivy climbing the walls like veins of history. Inside, the grand library, walls lined with leather-bound books on everything from Sicilian folklore to modern real estate law, served as Vito's command center. At 82, Vito cut an imposing figure despite the years. Tall and broad-shouldered, his silver hair neatly combed back, dressed in a custom-tailored suit that spoke of elegance rather than flash. His eyes, sharp as the winter lake below, missed nothing. He sat behind a massive oak desk, a crystal glass of aged scotch in hand, as Tony Russo, his loyal associate of 4 decades, paced the Persian rug. Russo, a stocky man in his 60s with a salt-and-pepper mustache and a voice gravelly from years of chain-smoking, had driven in from the city that morning. The traffic on the Kennedy Expressway had been a nightmare, horns blaring amid the grey November sky threatening snow, but nothing could dampen the urgency of his message. "Boss," Russo began, stopping to light a cigarette, the flame flickering in the dim lamplight. "It's the Johnsons. Harold and Evelyn. You remember, back in '72 when the unions were striking at the docks, Harold's old man pulled my uncle out of a bind with those teamsters, saved the whole operation from going under." Vito leaned back, the leather chair creaking softly, his mind drifting to that era. Chicago's outfit, the city's storied criminal network rooted in the Prohibition days of Al Capone, had long since evolved under leaders like Paul Ricca and Tony Accardo into a more subtle force. Labor ties, construction bids, and quiet philanthropy masking deeper influences. Vito himself had risen through those ranks, starting as a runner in the 1940s, navigating the chop shop wars and the pawn wars of the 70s with a code that valued loyalty above all. The Johnsons, a black family in a neighborhood that had seen waves of Italian immigrants like his own grandparents, had earned a debt that time hadn't erased. Vito set down his glass, the ice clinking like a distant bell. "Tell me everything." Russo recounted the eviction saga, the real estate firm's aggressive push, the courtroom drama downtown where the air hung heavy with the buzz of anxious families waiting their turn, and the disproportionate toll on black elders in areas like Englewood, where historical redlining had locked generations into precarious homes. Hale's company, Urban Renewal Partners, wasn't new to this. Whispers in City Hall suggested they targeted blocks with aging populations, flipping properties for condos that priced out long-time residents. Vito's network, extending from Cicero's old gambling dens to legitimate fronts in construction, picked up the chatter easily. He'd built his empire on such intelligence, much like the outfit's expansion into Hollywood extortion in the 40s. But now it was all above board, or so the lawyers claimed. "They're set to rule against the Johnsons next week," Russo finished, exhaling smoke toward the fireplace where embers glowed. "Judge Harlan's fair, but Hale's got pull with the alderman." A slow nod from Vito, his fingers drumming the desk. He remembered the 1950s, when the outfit under Accardo had muscled into suburban real estate, ensuring Italian families kept their footholds amid post-war booms. But Vito had always drawn lines, no unnecessary violence, especially not against innocents. The Mafia's code, forged in blood feuds like the St. Valentine's Day massacre, had softened with time, but loyalty remained ironclad. "Get me Hale's file," he instructed Russo, who nodded and stepped out to make calls from the estate's secure line. As the afternoon wore on, aides bustled in the kitchen, preparing espresso and cannoli, the aroma wafting through the halls. Vito walked to the window, gazing at the lake where freighters dotted the horizon like ghosts of the industrial past. Chicago had changed. Skyscrapers piercing the sky, diverse neighborhoods blending cultures, but the undercurrents of power play persisted, echoing the territorial divides Johnny Torrio had brokered in the 1920s. By evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns, Russo returned with a dossier thick as a novel. It detailed Marcus Hale, mid-40s, Ivy League sharp, with a firm that had displaced dozens in the last year alone. Irregularities abounded, zoning shortcuts, ties to developers who'd skirted fair housing laws, reminiscent of the 1968 riots that shook the city after Dr. King's assassination. Vito's foundation, the Moretti Community Trust, had quietly funded anti-eviction programs since the 1990s, a nod to his own immigrant roots fleeing Sicily's poverty. "This ends now," Vito declared, his voice steady. He picked up the phone, dialing a number from memory. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered, Councilman Ruiz, a long-time associate whose ward included the Johnsons' block. "Vito, long time," Ruiz said, the sound of papers shuffling in the background. Over the next hour, Vito outlined the situation, not as a threat but as a favor. Ruiz, indebted from a construction deal years back, promised to lean on the judge's clerks. No bribes, just influence, the modern way. Meanwhile, across town in the Johnsons' bungalow, the evening unfolded with quiet tension. Harold sat at the kitchen table, the yellowed linoleum reflecting the overhead light, sorting through old receipts to bolster their case. Evelyn moved about, stirring a pot of vegetable soup on the stove, the steam carrying notes of time from her herb garden. The neighborhood outside hummed with life. Children playing tag under streetlights, the distant rumble of the L train. A knock at the door startled them. It was their lawyer, Ms. Patel, a fierce advocate from the Legal Aid Society, her coat dusted with the first flurries of snow. "Good news," she said, stepping inside, the warmth enveloping her. "The firm's backing off. Something about resolved taxes. Anonymous donor covered it." Harold's eyes widened, Evelyn clasping her hands. They didn't know Vito's hand in it yet, but relief flooded the room like sunlight. Hale, in his glass-walled office overlooking the loop, felt the shift first. His assistant buzzed in. "Sir, the tip line's lighting up. Complaints about our South Side deals. HUD's sniffing around." Hale paced, tie loosened, staring at the city lights twinkling below. He'd built his career on aggressive flips, but Chicago's history of displacement, from the Great Migration's housing struggles to today's gentrification, made him cautious. When his phone rang again, the caller ID read, "Unknown." Vito's voice came through, calm as a still pond. "Marcus, we need to meet. Neutral ground. Tomorrow, the diner on Halsted." Hale swallowed hard. He'd heard stories of the outfit's reach, from the 1978 chop shop wars to quieter enforcements today. Agreeing, he hung up, the weight of unseen forces pressing in. The meeting happened at dawn, the diner alive with the sizzle of bacon and the chatter of early shift workers, truckers, nurses, a mix of black, Latino and white faces reflecting the city's pulse. Vito arrived in a black Lincoln, Russo at his side, while Hale pulled up in his Audi, nerves evident. Over black coffee and eggs, Vito laid it out. No drama, just business. "Drop the eviction. My trust covers the Johnsons' back taxes. In return, we partner on your next project. Legit, community-focused, win-win." Hale probed, mentioning board pressures and profits, but Vito's gaze held steady, recounting outfit law without specifics. How Accardo had navigated the 50 Senate hearings by blending crime with charity. The unspoken was clear. Vito's connections in unions and City Hall could make or break deals. By the time plates were cleared, Hale nodded. "Done." Word reached the Johnsons that afternoon via Ms. Patel, who visited again, this time with documents in hand. The bungalow filled with calls from neighbors, Mrs. Ramirez bringing tamales, the Wilkinsons from down the block offering to repaint the fence. Her impromptu gathering formed on the porch, laughter mingling with the crisp air as stories flowed. Tales of past evictions dodged, community bonds forged in church basements during the civil rights era. Harold raised a toast with iced tea, to home and those who watch over it. Evelyn smiled, sensing more than they knew. Vito, back at his estate, watched a muted news report on housing reforms, satisfied. The mafia boss hadn't stormed in guns blazing. He'd woven threads of the past into the present, ensuring justice in a city built on such complexities. As night fell, the lake whispered secrets to the shore, and Chicago slept a little sounder. Spring arrived in the Englewood neighborhood like a long-awaited guest, transforming the once barren lots into bursts of color. Tulips nodding in the breeze along cracked sidewalks, cherry blossoms drifting like confetti from trees planted decades ago by community groups. The Johnsons' bungalow, now sporting a fresh coat of sage-green paint that gleamed under the April sun, stood as a beacon amid the row houses. Some renovated, others still bearing the scars of winter neglect. Harold, cane in hand, knelt in the garden, his arthritic fingers gently pressing seeds into the soil, the earth cool and promising. Evelyn watched from the kitchen window, her apron tied around her waist as she kneaded dough for cornbread, the scent of rising yeast filling the home. Their victory over the eviction had rippled outward, strengthening not just their walls, but the very fabric of the block, where porch conversations now turned to plans for a community garden and youth mentorship programs. Months had passed since Vito Moretti's intervention, and life had settled into a rhythm laced with gratitude and subtle changes. The Moretti Community Trust, Vito's philanthropic arm, established in the 1980s to launder goodwill alongside legitimate investments, had stepped in quietly. Checks arrived for senior stability initiatives, covering not only the Johnsons' taxes, but also minor repairs. A new roof to fend off Chicago's relentless rains, updated wiring to meet code without the hassle. Harold and Evelyn learned of it through a letter on embossed stationery, vague yet warm, thanking them for their long-standing contributions to the community. They pieced it together. Old neighborhood lore about Vito's family helping during the 1960s riots, when flames lit the sky and families like theirs sheltered Italian neighbors fleeing the chaos. "It's come full circle," Evelyn said one evening, as they sat on the glider swing, the chains creaking softly, watching fireflies dance in the dusk. The block party that followed was a celebration of renewal, spilling from the Johnsons' yard into the street, where folding tables groaned under pots of jambalaya, empanadas, and Italian sausage from a local deli, cuisines blending like the faces around them. String lights twinkled overhead, powered by a generator humming in the alley, while a playlist of Motown hits from Harold's record collection poured from portable speakers. Neighbors gathered, the Ramirez family with their 3 kids chasing balloons, the Wilkinsons sharing stories of their own housing scares during the 2008 crash, and even a few activists from the Legal Aid Society, Ms. Patel among them, distributing flyers on tenant rights. Russo showed up unannounced, hat in hand, blending in with his casual polo shirt. "On behalf of Mr. Moretti," he said quietly to Harold, handing over a small envelope, details of a trust fund for their grandchildren's education. No fanfare, just the nod of respect. Evelyn offered him a slice of pie, and for a moment the man who navigated Chicago's shadows laughed like any guest. Across town, Marcus Hale's office in the Loop had transformed. The sleek conference room, once dominated by blueprints for luxury high-rises, now featured models of mixed-income housing, green spaces integrated into urban plans. The backlash from the Johnsons' case had been swift. Community petitions flooded City Hall, amplified by local news outlets covering the disproportionate eviction rates in black neighborhoods, statistics showing black women facing eviction at rates 3 times higher than white counterparts. Hale, pragmatic to his core, saw opportunity in pivot. Vito's partnership proposal became the blueprint, joint ventures on projects that included affordable units, with the trust providing seed funding and union labor from outfit-tied locals. Their first collaboration broke ground in May, a community center in Bronzeville with after-school programs and job training, the mayor cutting the ribbon amid cheers from diverse crowds. Haley, in a rare interview with the Chicago Tribune, credited "lessons from the field," his words a veiled nod to the diner meeting that reshaped his trajectory. Vito observed from his estate, where the lake now shimmered under summer haze. He delegated much to Russo, focusing on board meetings for his legitimate holdings, hotels in Vegas, echoes of the outfit's old Hollywood ties, but sanitized for the 21st century. A visit to the doctor that week reminded him of his age. The cardiologist's office in a sterile downtown clinic with its beeping monitors and fluorescent hum urged rest, but Vito thrived on purpose. He hosted a private dinner for key associates, the long mahogany table laden with osso buco and risotto, wine flowing from vineyards his family once protected in Sicily. Russo reported on the Johnsons, thriving, even speaking at a city council hearing on housing equity. "They quoted you, boss, without naming names," Russo chuckled. Vito raised his glass. "To debts paid and futures built." In the neighborhood, the changes deepened. The city council, spurred by the uproar, passed the Englewood Stability Act in June, a local ordinance mandating mediation for senior evictions and incentives for owner occupancy preservation. It drew from National Fair Housing Act precedents, addressing redlining's legacy, where black families like the Johnsons had been systematically underserved since the 1930s. Harold and Evelyn attended the vote, sitting in the ornate council chambers with its vaulted ceilings and polished wood, Evelyn's hand steady on his. "This is bigger than us," Harold whispered as applause erupted. Back home, they hosted a follow-up gathering, this time with elders from nearby blocks sharing oral histories, tales of the Great Migration, when Southern families arrived by train to Chicago's Promise, only to face covenants barring them from white areas. Younger residents listened, inspired to form a tenant union, their meetings held in the community center Hale's firm helped fund. As summer peaked, barbecues became weekly rituals, the air thick with smoke from grills and laughter from impromptu softball games in the empty lot. Evelyn's peach cobbler drew lines, while Harold spun yarns of his postal days, delivering mail through blizzards and strikes. One evening, as stars pricked the velvet sky, a rare visitor arrived, Vito himself, driven by Russo in the Lincoln, parking discreetly. He declined the crowd, speaking only to the couple on the porch. "Your home's a cornerstone," he said simply, his accent carrying faint Italian lilt. They talked for hours about resilience, the city's evolving mosaic from Capone's speakeasies to today's multicultural strides, and the quiet power of standing firm. Vito left with a promise of ongoing support, his silhouette fading into the night. By fall, the neighborhood bloomed fuller. The garden yielded tomatoes and herbs shared at potlucks. The community center hosted jazz nights honoring Chicago's blues legacy. The Johnson story, anonymized in newsletters and podcasts, became a touchstone, reminding residents that alliances forged in history's forge could defy displacement. Harold and Evelyn, rocking on their swing, reflected often. "We faced the storm," Evelyn said, "and came out rooted deeper. Ma, in Chicago's grand narrative, where the outfit's shadows had given way to light, their triumph echoed, a foundation not just of brick, but of enduring human connection."